All right, we got our next two sessions. We got Gina and Meredith here. And just as a reminder for those that do wish to participate in our social media challenge, you can post on Twitter or X or Instagram using the hashtag ReadySetMimioSTEM, and then be sure to tag us as well.
Some ideas and really integrating it with 3D printing and with AI and all of that great stuff that we're talking about today. I'm really excited. I was in the last session just hearing what people are doing in the classroom. I was a teacher for almost 20 years, so I miss some of those things that are happening in the classroom, those really exciting things. So before we get going, I just want to define what we're talking about when we're talking about immersive learning. So immersive learning, the three main things that we think about, the first one is virtual reality. And virtual reality is usually involves a headset, right? Oops, can't see that. It's kind of buried in there. But in virtual reality, you're completely covered. Your vision is completely covered. You're kind of taken away to another space. Augmented reality is a little different in that you can still see the environment behind you, but whatever you're looking at is placed in that environment. So I always like to give the example, if anybody was a Pokemon Go fan and you were going out in the park and running around and chasing little monsters, you'd hold up your phone, you'd see the park behind you, and that little monster would pop up. Or maybe when you're shopping on Amazon, right, you find a rug that you like, you hold up your device, the rug gets placed in your space. That's a good example of augmented reality. And then mixed reality, we're seeing a lot more of this. And an example of that would be, I have a pair of glasses on, but my whole vision is not covered. I just have kind of a screen in front of me. And let's say I'm fixing my car. I can overlay exactly what tools I need and what activities I need to do in the engine on top of my car engine. And then I can, kind of get rid of that and then go and do the fixes that I need to do. So it's an overlay of some type of virtual experience on top of a physical experience. So with those in mind, I would love for you to put in the chat, what experiences have you had with immersive learning? Whether that be using an Oculus Quest in your house, maybe your kids do VR, what kind of things, maybe you're using it in the classroom. Would love to hear what ways you are currently using VR. So I'll give you a minute to just throw that in the chat. And if you think nothing, I guarantee there's probably some way you have used immersive learning in your life. Watching my kids move in weird ways, virtual field trips, basic VR coding, I love it, very little. Beat Saber, probably better than I am at Beat Saber. I'm a little bit hopeless. All right, well, feel free to continue adding to the chat. I see some of you are still adding in there, but I saw things like virtual field trips. Angela says Vex virtual robots. That's cool. I didn't know that Vex had those. And then some other things like Beat Saber and watching kids on there. So great. All right. So why would we want to use a technology like this in the classroom? One of the rationales that we like to put in front of educators is that different technologies in the digital age can be challenges with integrating them. Student engagement, I know, is huge, especially post-COVID. I hear a lot of my teacher friends talk about students being disengaged, a lot of distractions in the classroom, lack of focus, that lack of authentic experiences and personalization. So, really getting kids, building that background knowledge and getting them on the same page before you start a unit. I was an ESL teacher, and background knowledge and authentic experiences were always things that were challenging in the classroom. Oftentimes we have technology that isn't accessible to all of our students and isn't inclusive of all of our students' needs. And then sometimes when we look at new technologies in the classroom, even new STEM tools, we really have to evaluate the impact on learning outcomes, and are they actually doing what we say they're going to do. So really what VR does is it really empowers educators to help overcome some of those distractions in the classroom, and it helps kids with the focus and lead to higher order thinking skills. There's a lot of critical thinking that goes into using a VR headset in the classroom if it's intentional. Also, just the idea that immersive content can really bridge that gap between passive and active learning. You may have seen this kind of pyramid before. This has been around for a while, but the idea that passive learning, things like lecture, reading, AV, even demonstrations are passive learning. But then when kids actually have to actively participate in discussion or by doing or by teaching others, that's where kind of the magic happens in education and really in retention of complex subjects. There's a lot of research out there. I encourage you to dig in if this is something that you're interested in implementing in your classroom. But ultimately, kids showed increased motivation. They showed higher academic achievement and engagement scores. Overall, VR displayed an improved learning experience, so higher engagement, knowledge acquisition, understanding and remembering, all awesome things, right? And the VR student showed significantly better academic performance. So again, when implemented in a strategic, intentional way, it can have some really positive effects on the classroom. And honestly, this is my favorite, it's just because it's fun. So back when I was in the classroom, I used Google Expeditions, which many of you probably heard of. It's no longer a thing, but I would sit my students in a circle on the floor, give everybody a headset, and we would go underwater, and the joy in the room would just increase by a million, right? So kids would get so excited and they say, look at that, oh my gosh, do you see that? And they want to take off their headsets, they want to talk to each other. And it was the most engaged I saw them, throughout their whole day. So I just think it's such a fun way of, meeting learning objectives in the classroom. So what does this look like in the classroom? And before I go on, does anybody have any questions about anything I just said or anything they want to add to some of those benefits that you've seen in the classroom? I see a few more people added in some ideas there, just virtual field trips, science classroom design. Kristen says it's new to their STEM program this year. Well, feel free to respond to anything I'm saying in the chat, to make this a little bit more interactive. But some of, when we're thinking about VR in the classroom, I think there's a lot of ways that maybe we haven't thought of that just are, your initial thoughts with how you might use virtual reality, right? Virtual field trips are always kind of the first thing that comes to mind. But in the classroom, and the way I've structured this is really everything in this elementary column, you could move to middle school, everything in middle school could move to high school. But this is just kind of a framework to think about how you might use it at the different grade levels. So in the elementary setting, in a STEM setting, I love using VR just as an exposure to the technology and even doing foundational lessons. So asking kids where they've seen virtual reality in their everyday lives. Why is VR and AR important? Why is immersive learning important? And starting to get those conversations about the technology itself. So not necessarily using the technology to learn, but what is it? And taking some time to do some of that exploration with the tech. Anticipatory sets are a great way to use VR. With younger students, we want to limit their time in the headsets. We don't want kids to be in the headset for 15, 20 minutes. 3 to 5 minute spurts is great. And so doing a quick, like I mentioned, underwater, you can quick put on a headset, everybody can look around, and maybe that launches a unit that we're doing on oceans. Or maybe we want to do a quick tour of the setting of a story before we launch into reading of the story. So it can be really good at kind of setting the scene for your lesson. Comprehension checks. So a quick way to do, maybe I'm teaching a lesson on science. I have some examples coming up, so I don't want to give them all away, but a way that you can have students just pop in the headset, maybe answer a quick question, do a quick assessment, a quick check-in in any different content area. Visualizations, models, and 3D scenes. Models can be so wonderful in the VR headset. So whether you're using VR or AR, something like a merge cube, a visualization that students can rotate tactily, something that you wouldn't have access to in the classroom, right? It could be something really big like space, or it could be really something small like an atom that you wouldn't have access to without this type of visualization. And that 3D model and scene is just so much more impactful than just viewing it 2D in a textbook or on a Chromebook screen. Building background knowledge, I talked a little bit about that. Setting the stage for your lesson and really getting students on the same page. So maybe we have some students who have never been to a farm. We can all go to a farm and, set some background knowledge for that. Or maybe we want to bring students to a city that they've never been to begin a lesson. Life skills is something that we've seen if we have any, special education teachers in the group. Being able to, I think of social stories, back in the day, social stories were these little books that we could read with kids. Now we see a lot of people doing social stories with virtual reality. So maybe it's a tour of the school, maybe it's walking from the classroom to the lunchroom and saying hi to the principal on the way. They can watch that scene over and over and over in their headset until they get comfortable with that. We've also heard a lot of people using these in transitions. So between elementary and middle school, going to the new school and filming the new school in 360, a 360 video and bringing that in and putting hotspots and audio. There's just some really cool ways you can incorporate that. And then of course, creation. And I'll give a few examples of creation. I think when students get to middle school, VR can be great to bridge learning gaps. So as those learning gaps widen, I can personalize the experience and differentiate the experience in headsets. So maybe I have one student that needs to work on fractions. I have another student who's ready for adding and subtracting fractions. I have another working on mixed fractions. I can put each of them in a different headset. They can all be working on their own type of content and nobody knows what they're doing in their headset. So it's what we like to say is distraction free and judgment free and allows for that differentiation. Again, enhancing understanding of complex subjects in both science and math. And then of course, we've talked about tours and a lot of you mentioned those tours of world sites. And then when you get into high school, we can really get into some advanced studies. CTE is really big in immersive learning. So welding, auto repair, even cooking, and all of these great career and technical skills, being able to do those safely in an immersive environment before you actually go and practice in real life. That's what a lot of people are doing with those. I've recently spoken with a curriculum company, and they have kids at the high school level that do readings around sensitive subjects, whether it be suicide prevention or drug use or alcohol use, and being able to view that content in a headset as opposed to just on my Chromebook screen where anybody could look over my shoulder and see what I'm doing. That's a really cool way to use that immersive environment to allow students just some privacy and some focus with what they're looking at. And then advanced creation tools like Unity, Unreal Engine. We have our own tool called UMake VR, and again, creating things in a CTE type space, but also creating content maybe for younger students in the district or things like that. I'm just going to peek in the chat because I see there's a couple things let's see. So it looks like Hannah mentioned exploring things like Pompeii, places that we wouldn't be able to go to. Jonathan just reaffirmed CTE, using things like welding simulations. Awesome. Thank you for those, affirming some of those ideas. So here's just a few, and you guys, I could have gone on all day with examples of how to use VR in the classroom, but these are just a few ideas from some of the curriculum that we have. So this is an idea of, this is a life cycle of a butterfly activity, and this is a full learning module, so beginning to end. I have some sample learning objectives here. I used to teach at a STEM school, and we did a lot with the life cycle of a butterfly. We got all the butterflies from the University of Minnesota, and we'd have all the pupas hanging in our classroom and everything else. But using something like this, it is a full module, so it could just be a lesson. But I could also, again, use this as a whole group experience to kick off our unit. So maybe this is just introducing vocabulary to students, introducing concepts. It could be used to provide extra practice for individual students. So whether that be students who needed more help with the concept, or maybe like I had my ESL students, maybe it's some time for them to pause and practice the words and the language. There's audio that goes along with each of the words, so they could just practice listening to that vocabulary and getting more proficient in that. Or I could use it at the end of as an assessment tool at the end of the unit. So after we've done all of our learning about life cycles and butterflies and flowers and seeds, I could use this as a way to assess students, and then I would see all of their scores on how they did on this activity, so I could see, who needs to have, more practice with this particular topic. Middle school, I love the idea of career exploration in VR. And I kind of have this video running while I'm talking here, but in our particular VR content, they can take a quiz to discover their aptitudes, and then they can go in and explore thousands of careers in that STEM field, in just any type of career that you could think of. And really these careers that I hadn't even thought of, things like ethical hackers, what would it like to be a drone operator, lifestyle influencers, all these cool careers that it'd be really hard to share with our students all of these options, but in VR we can make those come alive and really let kids see a day in the life of, to get an idea for what those careers are. After watching some of these videos, I thought maybe I needed a career change because some of them were so cool. And then I love pairing VR with unplugged activities. So how can I maybe start in the VR headset and then move on and have students do a compare and contrast, sharing out with a group. Anytime you can get kids to take off that headset and turn and talk and share, that just fosters that communication in the classroom, which is so important in those 21st century learning environments. And even, doing additional research on careers that they saw that they found really interesting. I can get to that next slide here. And then I have a couple other math and science examples, but this is one. And if you would like to visit this umedi.com/demo, we have this particular activity in WebXR, and I can throw that in the chat too. But this is an activity where kids learned about the probability of simple events. So they go in and it's a little Las Vegas-y. They've got a table with cards. They have a table with dice. They have another table with basically a kind of a roller ball, like a bingo roller, and they can pick numbers. But kids are able to learn about this concept with all of these hands-on activities that if I was a teacher in the classroom, it would take me a lot of time to set up each of these stations for my kids, and they can go in and do it right in that virtual reality. So that's in a middle school math example. And then here's a high school example. And if you are a high school science chemistry teacher and you understand this concept, I am very proud of you, because even as I put this in, I was like, I'm not sure what titration of a strong acid with a strong base is, but I know it's very important in chemistry. But something like this, a very complex topic with a lot of different pieces that you might need for a lab that you can have in a virtual lab situation where you don't have to worry about safety, you don't have to worry about cleaning everything up. And this is one way to do this. Hands-on experience in real life is so important too, but being able to reinforce those concepts in a space like VR is very cool. And then I just have a couple creation examples. When I used to go around and train on VR, one of the things, the second we would talk about using VR, people would say, okay, now how can my kids make this? And somebody mentioned coding. So things like CoSpaces, you can create your own virtual worlds and your own augmented reality to view on like a Merge Cube or through a headset. This is an example that I used to do in the classroom. I used to read Number the Stars with my 5th graders, and they never understood the setting of the story. So the setting starts in Denmark, and then it moves to Sweden, and kids had a real hard time just grasping what that setting had to do, why it was important to the story. And so being able to take kids there and create a learning activity where there's a summary of the chapter, there's some hot spots they can go to and go to different settings of the story. They could take a quiz. That's one idea. Another one that I love with the connection to 3D design and printing is kids could bring in their 3D models that they've created into like a museum type setting. And then as a class, you could go through and evaluate their 3D models prior to printing. Especially when you're getting into advanced printing, you can rotate the model, you can look all around it and find maybe areas of improvement or, give feedback to each other. And then they could pick their best one and then, take it to the printer. So this would be very easy for teachers to upload this into a creation tool, or for students to upload this and create kind of a portfolio of their designs without having to print everything on the printer. And then something that I think is really cool, I was actually playing with this to prepare for this presentation, but there's a lot of AI generated content out there now. So I know the keynote's going to be talking about AI. I wanted to bring that in, but I went into blockade labs, and for this one, I asked, the AI to create an agriculture scene with showing crops and buildings and tools. And this is what it put together. The AI does seem to like the palm trees. I'm not quite sure what's up with that, but it generated this scene for me, and I could use this to create a lesson by putting, again, hotspots, other information, text, things like that. Or students could use this in their creation as well. So I know back, even just a few years ago, it was challenging finding 360 content. And now with AI, that eliminates a few of those challenges.
I just wanted to butt in and let you know that there's about 5 minutes left. And there's also a question in the chat for you as well.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. It's kind of taking over my whole screen here. So what software do you bring in? So there's a couple different creation tools, Erin. So we have one specifically that we create in-house called YouMakeVR. There's also things like ThingLink. There is CoSpaces, although I don't think CoSpaces you can bring in those 3D prints. There is a few other ones out there that are a little bit more high level. I can certainly, at the end of this, my email will be in there. I can send you some more ideas too. If you wanted to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to do that too. But I was using our in-house one on that called YouMakeVR. So I gave a couple examples: science, math, language arts, creation. So what do you think are some benefits to completing these activities in VR? If you were using this in the classroom, why do you think this would be engaging for kids? Feel free to just, if you have an idea, throw it in the chat. I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time here, but do you see these as being, increasing engagement with your students and increasing comprehension, or what do you think the benefits of those would be? Well, if you have anything you want to add to the chat, I'm just going to go on to this final slide here. But here's just some, real concrete ways that you can bring VR into your instruction. So stations are small groups in the classroom, intervention groups, the ELL classroom, media center, makerspace, or STEM lab, whole group instruction. But knowing that you don't have to have 30 headsets in order to integrate VR. It's a great small group activity, a great station activity. And I see there's a couple ideas in the chat. So students are less afraid to make mistakes. I completely agree with that. Students can work at different levels, increase student engagement. Awesome. So as we wrap up, are there any questions that I can answer in the chat right now? I'm a little sad that my skeleton isn't dancing like his was on the main screen, but. So I'll just put this final slide up, and if any of you would like to, if you have any questions about creation or anything else, feel free to reach out to me. I love talking VR. It's one of my passions. I promise I won't try to sell you anything. I just absolutely love the dialogue of, talking about how to use this tool in the classroom. So feel free to jot my email down. I also have our website here too that you could reach out in some of our socials. But just this last chat in here, that students love anything with technology, and being able to visualize places is very valuable. And I think if you've ever used VR, if you've ever put on a Oculus or anything, you know that there's power in that ability to be transported into another place. So thank you guys all for coming. If you have any other comments, feel free to pop into the chat. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your STEM presentations.
All right, it looks like we got everybody back from both sessions. As you're joining back into our main room, let us know in the chat again, what was your biggest takeaway? What was a highlight from the session? Something you are looking forward to, something that is exciting. Type it in the chat, set your settings to everyone so that everyone can see your biggest takeaways. All right, here's a quick update. I haven't gotten to everybody, so if you have posted on Twitter, X, or Instagram, and you don't see your post here yet, we're trying to get as many as we can. Love this one with the dog, got the thumbs up, anything like this, just taking a quick picture or screenshot of your session, or as we can see, Angela's just typing out some awesome takeaways that she's had. So love these posts. This interaction's fantastic. And don't forget, there are some prizes to be had here. So we do have a Mimeo STEM challenge as well. And our Mimeo STEM challenge is something that takes place after today's session. So the social media, you're commenting, you're posting about what your takeaways are. But if you also are wanting to get more involved with creating something and then showing us what you've created, there is another chance for either a Robo E3 10-pack of filament My STEM Kids Teacher Plan or a Lyric portable sound system. And then we will also put a link to all of the rules with our Mimeo STEM challenge. It's more of an after today's event challenge, and it's about crafting engaging educational activities. So there's a lot of detail on this screen, but what we will do is we will put a link in the chat so that you can check out at a later time or when it's easier for you what that Mimeo STEM challenge entails.